The salty tang of this ocean air clung to the skin like a whispered promise. It was a crisp autumn morning in late September 1987 when the Danner family eased their sailboat out of the harbor in a sleepy coastal town on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia. The sky was a pale canvas of gray and blue, the kind that hinted at both calm and mystery. Mark Danner, the father, was a man of quiet determination. At 42, his face was weathered but steady, with a strong jawline and eyes that held a cautious kindness. He had always loved the sea, its unpredictable moods and vast, endless horizon, and this weekend trip was meant to be a rare escape from the strain of daily life. His wife, Anna, aged 40, was graceful and practical, with an easy smile that softened her sharp green eyes. She had packed carefully, making sure their 2 children were bundled against the morning chill. Emily, their daughter, was 13, caught in that fragile space between childhood and adulthood. She fidgeted with the hem of her jacket, excitement and nerves flickering behind her brown eyes. Her younger brother, Jack, 9 years old and restless, clutched a small toy boat he'd brought along, his blond hair tousled by the breeze. The family had planned the weekend with quiet hopes to sail around the nearby islands, explore hidden coves, and simply be together away from the hum of the town. Mark checked the rigging one last time while Anna arranged supplies below deck. Emily and Jack ran to the bow, their laughter mingling with the slap of water against the hull. "Ready for adventure?" Mark called out, a small smile tugging at his lips. Emily nodded, her face bright. "Can't wait." The boat slipped away from the dock, cutting through the calm waters of the bay. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing in the cool morning air. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. The world was open, endless, a place of freedom. But as the shoreline faded behind them, an uneasy feeling crept in. Mark glanced back at the harbor, noting the faint haze settling over the town. The wind, which had been gentle, began to pick up, tugging insistently at the sails. Anna tightened her grip on the railing, her eyes scanning the horizon with a flicker of concern. "Did you feel that?" she asked quietly. "Just a change in the wind," Mark replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Emily shivered, pulling her jacket closer. "It's like the ocean's watching us," she whispered, half in jest. Jack, oblivious to the tension, pointed toward a cluster of dark clouds gathering in the distance. "Storm?" Mark frowned. The weather had been clear in the forecast, but now the sky seemed to darken unnaturally fast. The radio crackled suddenly, a static hiss breaking the calm. "This is Danner, heading out as planned. Weather looks good so far." Mark spoke into the handheld device, his voice steady. No reply came. The boat rocked gently, then with growing insistence, as the wind shifted sharply. The ocean's surface turned restless, whitecaps forming like angry teeth. "The ocean isn't empty," Mark murmured under his breath, almost to himself. "It listens." And with that, the Danner family sailed into the unknown. The change came without warning. By mid-afternoon, the once gentle breeze had morphed into an insistent gust, pushing the boat faster through the choppy waters. Mark adjusted the sails, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, though a nervous edge was starting to show in his normally steady movements. Anna watched him, her face pale, though she didn't speak of her unease. She was the calm to his storm, the grounding force that allowed him to push forward, even when his own instincts screamed to turn back. Emily and Jack were below deck, their voices muffled by the creaking wood and the rush of wind outside. Emily, sensing the tension in the air, sat near the cabin window, her eyes drawn to the horizon. The sky had darkened further, now a murky gray, like a storm trapped in suspended animation. It wasn't just the weather that unsettled her, it was something else, something deep within her chest. A pull, an almost invisible thread that seemed to tug at her heart. "Mark, we should turn back," Anna said, her voice strained. "This isn't right. The storm—" "I've sailed through worse, Anna. We'll be fine." Mark cut her off, though his voice was less convincing than it had been earlier. The boat creaked again, as though protesting the rising waves. "We'll round the cape, and then we'll be in calm waters. I'll keep an eye on it." Anna didn't reply, but the edge in her expression spoke volumes. She knew Mark had been pushing them to keep going for the sake of adventure, to escape the demands of everyday life. But the ocean, it had a way of changing, of becoming something else entirely when you weren't paying attention. The wind howled louder, and the sea churned beneath them. The boat was small, and even though Mark had been a sailor for years, the sense of isolation was palpable. He glanced at the radio again. No signal. No sign of other boats nearby, just the endless expanse of water, dark and untamed. "Mom?" Emily's voice came from below deck. She was suddenly standing at the foot of the ladder, her wide eyes filled with concern. "It feels like something's wrong." Anna reached for her daughter, pulling her close. "It's okay, sweetie. We're just caught in a squall. Nothing to worry about." But Emily wasn't convinced. She had never been the kind of child to panic. But the sensation, the eerie stillness before the storm, had unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. Jack appeared at her side, his little face pressed against the window, watching the waves with fascination. "The water looks funny," he said. "It's black." Mark heard his son's comment and froze, looking over his shoulder. The ocean wasn't black, but it did look different. The deep blues had given way to a shadowy, inky hue, stretching out as far as the eye could see. The waves, too, had a strange quality to them, as though they were rolling with purpose, as if something, or someone, was guiding them. "Dad?" Jack's voice cracked to the air, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "Why does the water look like that?" Mark swallowed hard, trying to focus. "It's just deeper water out here, buddy. Nothing to worry about." But he wasn't sure. There was something in the way the water moved, something unsettling in its rhythm. The boat seemed to sway more than it should have, listing slightly with each passing wave. Anna, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the horizon, felt a chill crawl up her spine. The storm had come on too quickly, too violently, and the strange, dark water didn't look right. It was as though they were entering some otherworldly realm, far removed from the ordinary world they knew. The ocean, which had once felt like an old friend, now felt like an unfamiliar, dangerous adversary. A force with its own will, one that listened, one that responded. Mark turned the wheel, attempting to steer the boat toward a more sheltered route. But no matter which direction he chose, the wind seemed to push them back, as though they were caught in an invisible web. "Dad!" Emily shouted from below deck. "I think something's—" The boat lurched violently to one side, throwing the family off balance. The sound of splintering wood pierced the air as water began to pour over the sides. Panic erupted in a rush of screams and shouts. Mark struggled to regain control, his fingers slipping on the wheel. The storm was no longer just a passing squall. It was a fury, alive and relentless. "Mark, we need to abandon ship," Anna screamed. "Now!" But before anyone could move, the ocean surged with a force that sent the boat careening sideways. The mast cracked, and everything went black. Mark awoke to an eerie stillness. It was as though the world had paused, held its breath, waiting. His body ached, a dull pain spreading from his ribs down to his legs. He was sprawled across a damp surface, disoriented, his hands gripping the jagged edge of something solid. The sound of waves was muted, as if he were underwater, the sea itself holding its secrets close. His eyes flickered open, and he saw only blackness, but the kind of blackness that held depth, as though the darkness were tangible. His senses were overwhelmed by the taste of salt on his tongue, the coolness of the air that clung to his skin. "Anna?" His voice cracked as he tried to sit up, but his body refused to obey. Panic fluttered in his chest, but there was no room for it. Not yet. He needed to find them. His heart raced. The only thing steady about him was the sound of his own breath. He tried again, pushing against the surface beneath him with what little strength he had left. His fingers scraped against something soft, wet, fabric, and then the unmistakable feel of splintered wood. His mind raced back to the storm, the boat, the terrifying lurch, the overwhelming sense of power as the ocean rose against them. He remembered the panic in Anna's face, the children's screams. Had they made it? "Anna!" he called again, louder this time. No answer. The emptiness felt suffocating. With great effort, Mark pulled himself upright, blinking against the darkness. His eyes slowly adjusted to the murky gray light that began to bleed through the fog. The air smelled thick with the dampness of seaweed and brine. The ocean stretched out before him, vast and uninviting. But there was no sign of the boat, no familiar structure of sails, no remnants of the wreck. And then he saw it. A shape on the horizon, a dark mass. For a moment he thought it might be his mind playing tricks, a figment of exhaustion or the lingering effects of the storm. But no, it was real. A stretch of land, a rocky outcrop emerging from the waters like an ancient sentinel. His heart skipped a beat. They hadn't sunk. They had been thrown to the mercy of the sea, but the land was still out there, waiting. He could make it. He stumbled, his legs shaky as he clung to a floating chunk of debris for support. It wasn't much, but it was enough to guide him forward. The fog thickened as he paddled toward the shore, the land becoming clearer with every stroke. The island was small, jagged, and looked barren. Its surface was littered with dark stones and sparse patches of seaweed. There was no sign of civilization, no lighthouse, no structures of any kind, just a stretch of rock and mist. Mark's thoughts raced. Where was Anna? Where were the kids? Had they made it to shore too? His mind caught on a gnawing fear, a deep primal worry. The ocean had taken them once before. What if it had taken them again? But the thought was unbearable, so he pushed it aside, forcing his body to move, to fight through the pain and the exhaustion. He reached the rocky shore, the cold water lapping at his ankles as he pulled himself onto the island, gasping for breath. The air was so still now, a strange, unnatural silence hung over everything. He didn't stop to rest, not yet. His eyes scanned the rocky expanse, desperate for any sign of his family. His mind kept returning to the storm, the way the boat had tilted, the violent crash, the feeling of being tossed like a rag doll. If Anna or the kids had been thrown into the sea, it felt impossible, but he had to check. He had to know. He called out, his voice cracking against the dead silence of the island. "Anna! Emily! Jack!" There was no reply. The only sound was the endless lap of water against the rocks. Then, as if the very island had decided to answer, something caught his eye. A flicker of movement, something bright against the gray seaweed and stones. Mark's breath hitched. He stumbled toward it, his pulse quickening. His heart thundered in his chest as he drew closer to the object. A piece of cloth, a torn scrap of fabric. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a surge of hope through his veins. The fabric was familiar. It was Anna's jacket. His hands trembled as he knelt to retrieve it, a sense of urgency overcoming him. He could feel the weight of the ocean pressing on him, the lingering dread that something was wrong. The island was too quiet, too empty. Then, from behind him, he heard a sound, a soft rustling, like footsteps in the wet sand. Mark's body tensed. Slowly he turned. There, standing just a few feet away, was a figure. At first, Mark thought it was Anna, or perhaps Emily, or Jack. His mind grasped for the familiar, the comforting. But as his eyes adjusted, his blood ran cold. It wasn't Anna. It wasn't anyone he recognized. The figure was cloaked in shadows, the outline indistinct but tall, too tall. The person, if it could be called that, was staring at him, silent and unmoving. The air seemed to freeze around them, the fog closing in like a curtain. Mark's throat went dry. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The figure didn't answer. The figure remained still, unmoving in the gray mist. Mark's breath came in short, ragged bursts, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and confusion. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to escape from this strange, haunting presence. But his legs wouldn't obey, as though they were frozen to the spot, rooted in the very earth beneath him. The figure's silhouette was blurred, as if the fog itself clung to them, refusing to let go. For a long, agonizing moment, Mark couldn't bring himself to look away. His thoughts raced, trying to process what he was seeing. The island was deserted. No one else had been on the boat. No one had survived the storm. Had they? Was this some cruel trick of the mind, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, by grief, by the ocean itself? The air was thick with tension, heavy with silence. The only sound was the soft lap of water against the shore, the faint rustling of seaweed in the wind. Then, just as Mark thought he might lose his nerve, the figure stirred. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, almost as if it were gliding over the ground. Every step it took seemed to stretch time, like the space between them had widened, as though Mark had suddenly become an intruder in this place, a place he didn't belong. "Who—" Mark started again, his voice barely a breath, his throat tight with fear. The figure stopped just in front of him. There was no sudden movement, no startling noise. But Mark could feel the presence, the weight of something ancient, something otherworldly. It was then that the figure spoke, but not with words. The voice came to him in a way that bypassed language entirely. It was a sensation, a vibration that passed through his chest, deep into his bones, as if the island itself were speaking to him. "You are not alone." Mark's knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed to the ground, struggling to breathe. The air seemed to close in on him, thick and suffocating. His fingers clawed at the rocky earth, desperate to steady himself, to hold on to something real. "You are not alone, but you are lost." The voice was not one of malice, but of something deeper, something that transcended human understanding. It was the kind of voice you might hear in the stillness between sleep and waking, the whisper of the ocean itself. Mark could feel it within him, the weight of its meaning pressing against his soul. The figure moved closer, and Mark's mind screamed at him to get up, to run, to do anything other than stay there on the cold, unforgiving rocks. But his body refused to listen, his muscles betraying him in his weakened state. "Please," Mark's voice cracked. "Where are my family, my wife, my children? Please, tell me." The figure did not answer. Instead, it raised a hand, long skeletal fingers emerging from the shadowy cloak, pale and almost translucent in the dim light. It gestured toward the sea, its finger pointing into the distance. Mark's eyes followed the gesture, his gaze drawn to the vast dark water. The ocean stretched out endlessly, swallowing everything in its wake. And then, just beyond the horizon, he saw something. A faint flicker of light. It was too distant to be certain, too far for the human eye to discern clearly, but it was there, gleaming like a dying star on the edge of the world. His breath hitched. "What is that?" he whispered, more to himself than to the figure. The figure remained silent, watching him intently. For a long moment there was nothing but the sound of the wind, the murmur of the ocean, and the deep, resonating silence between them. Mark could feel his pulse quickening, his heart thrumming louder in his chest. He had to move, had to follow that light, had to find the answers. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure began to fade. It wasn't as though it disappeared exactly, but rather that it dissolved into the air around it, as if the very mist of the island had claimed it. One moment, the figure stood before him, a living presence. The next, it was gone, leaving only the lingering feeling of something lost. Mark remained where he was, his mind spinning, his body unsteady on the jagged rocks. The island had swallowed it whole, and yet, in the absence of the figure, there was a faint echo left behind, a whisper, a calling. His thoughts raced as his instincts took over, propelling him forward. He had no choice now. The light on the horizon, it was the only clue, the only sign that he was still tethered to the world he knew. The island was still silent, but something had shifted in the air. The fog had grown thicker, darker. The weight of the past seemed to press on him. The weight of what had happened to his family, to Anna, to Emily and Jack. What was it the figure had said? "You are not alone." He couldn't waste time pondering the cryptic words. The light in the distance beckoned him like a lighthouse, guiding the lost. Mark stood shakily, using a jagged rock for support, and began to walk toward the shore. Every step felt heavy, but there was a sense of purpose now. Whatever had happened to his family, whatever was waiting for him on the other side of the island, he had to keep going. The ocean stretched before him, and as he walked, the silence followed. The fog thickened, swallowing the shoreline as Mark moved forward. Each step he took seemed heavier than the last, the ground beneath him more unstable, as though the island itself were shifting in subtle, imperceptible ways. The water lapped at his ankles, the coolness of it seeping through his worn boots. He didn't stop to take a breath. The pull of the light on the horizon was too strong, too consuming. The island felt wrong, not in a way that could be immediately explained, but in the way the air felt too thick to breathe, the stillness too absolute. The sea, the earth, the very sky above seemed to press down on him, as though they were all connected by some invisible thread. It was as if this place had a consciousness, a will that was beyond his understanding. The figure's words echoed in his mind. "You are lost, but you are not alone." What did that mean? What had he seen back there, in the shadows of the island? Was it real? Had the ocean claimed his mind as much as it had claimed the ship? Mark forced the thoughts away, concentrating instead on the light. It was brighter now, gleaming from the distance like a beacon. Not the soft, natural light of a lighthouse, but a harsh, unnatural glow. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to it, as though it was the last thing tethering him to the world he once knew. As he walked, the rocks beneath his feet began to change. The jagged edges softened, and the ground became smoother, as if the island were molding itself around him. His eyes widened. The stones beneath him began to shimmer faintly, like the surface of water at dawn, rippling, shifting. He stumbled, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the stone. The texture was cold but slick, almost like the surface of something living. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Something was changing in the island itself. Mark quickened his pace, pushing himself forward, even as his legs screamed in protest. The light was so close now, but it wasn't until he rounded the next outcropping of rock that he saw it clearly, the source of the light. It wasn't a lantern or a fire or anything familiar. It was an object. No, it was a shape, a distortion in the air itself. The light was pulsing, shifting in a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of his own heart. It hovered just above the water, suspended between two jagged rocks, casting an eerie glow over the waves. It flickered like a dying star, but it wasn't just light. It was movement, something tangible, like a ripple in the fabric of reality. Mark's pulse raced as he approached it, his feet sinking slightly into the now soft sand. The closer he got, the more distorted the world seemed around him, as if the space was warping, bending at the edges. Then, in an instant, the light flickered once more, and something moved within it. A figure. Mark froze. It wasn't the same as the first figure he'd seen on the shore, but it was similar. This one was darker, its outline indistinct, its form shifting in and out of view like smoke in a gust of wind. But as it moved, Mark could make out shapes, shapes that looked familiar. It was the face of his daughter, Emily, flickering within the glow, her brown eyes wide with fear, staring back at him. And beside her, just beyond the distortion, was Jack, his face ghostly pale, his mouth open as though trying to speak, but unable to. Mark's breath hitched. "Emily? Jack?" His voice cracked, breaking through the silence of the island. The faces of his children flickered again, growing fainter. They didn't speak, but their eyes, those eyes, followed him. And then, as though to answer his unspoken question, the figure began to move again, this time pointing directly at him. "Come closer." Mark's chest tightened. He didn't want to move. He didn't want to approach the light, but everything inside him screamed that he had to. The pulsing, glowing shape, the eyes of his children. He couldn't leave them behind. With trembling hands, he stepped forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, his heart racing in his chest as he drew closer to the light. The closer he got, the more the air seemed to thicken, like stepping into something viscous, something that clung to him. His breath became shallow, his skin cold with sweat, but still he moved forward. The pulse of the light was almost deafening now, like the rhythm of a heart too large to contain itself. Then, just as his outstretched hand was about to make contact with the shape, the air snapped. The light disappeared. The distortion in the air vanished like smoke in the wind, leaving nothing but the quiet sound of the ocean and the distant call of seagulls. Mark stood, frozen, his hand still reaching out into empty space, his heart thundering in his chest. The glow was gone. His children were gone. The island was silent again, but in the place where the light had been, something else remained. A bottle. A simple glass bottle, its surface slick with the remnants of seawater. Mark's hand trembled as he picked it up, his mind reeling. He could feel the cold weight of it in his palm, the smooth glass offering no explanation for the strange, pulsing light he'd just witnessed. It was sealed with a dark wax. Mark's fingers shook as he removed the seal, the familiar action giving him a momentary sense of normalcy. Inside the bottle was a journal, its pages frayed and damp with seawater, but still legible. He unfurled the first page, his heart racing as he read the words, written in a familiar hand. "The ocean isn't empty. It listens." It was Mark's handwriting. Mark's hands trembled as he held the journal, its damp pages clinging together like ghosts from the past. The words, written in his own hand, sent a ripple of confusion through him. "The ocean isn't empty. It listens." He had no memory of writing this, of even seeing this journal before. He flipped through the pages, the rough paper fragile between his fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably his, but it was wrong. The words didn't flow as they should. Some of the sentences were disjointed, as though he had been writing in a haze, unaware of what he was committing to paper. The ink was smudged, stained with seawater, and some of the pages had been torn at the edges. Yet the words remained legible, and Mark found himself unable to look away, compelled to read them. March 17th, 1987. We left at dawn, the sky clear, the air crisp. The sea is calm, and we are making good time. Anna is nervous, but I think she'll relax once we're out of sight of the shore. Emily and Jack are excited, as usual. They've been talking about what they'll do when we get to the new island. They want to explore, maybe even swim with the dolphins. I don't think I've seen them so happy in a long time. There's something about the sea, though, something that calls to me. I can feel it in my chest. It's like it's waiting for something. Or someone. March 18th, 1987. The weather has turned. We're caught in a squall. The wind came out of nowhere, and the waves are getting larger. I should have turned back sooner, but I didn't want to disappoint Anna or the kids. They're all below deck now, trying to ride it out. I'm staying at the helm, trying to keep the boat steady. The ocean feels different now. It's like it has a voice, a pulse. It's as though it's alive. March 19th, 1987. Anna is scared. She's asking me to turn around, but the storm won't let us. I don't know how much longer we can stay out here. The wind is relentless, the waves crashing against us like they're trying to pull us under. I don't know if we're going to make it. I keep hearing voices. It's like whispers in the wind, but I can't understand them. At first, I thought it was the storm, the way the waves crash against the hull, but no, it's not the storm. The ocean isn't empty. It listens. The pages continued, each entry growing more chaotic, more desperate. Mark's breath quickened as he read on, the words blurring as his hands trembled. March 20th, 1987. We are lost. The storm is still with us, but it's not the storm that terrifies me. There's something else out here, something watching us. I can feel it, watching, waiting. The voices are louder now. They're coming from the water. From below, I can hear them even when the wind dies down. It's like the sea is calling me, pulling me in. I don't know how to explain it. It's like I'm not supposed to be here, like the ocean is something more than just water. Anna and I are arguing. She doesn't understand. I don't know if I do, either. March 21st, 1987. I've seen it. There's something down there, beneath the water. It's not fish, not whales, it's something else. Something ancient. It's moving closer to the boat. I can't get it out of my mind. I think the ocean is alive. It's alive and it's angry, and it's coming for us. Mark's hands went cold as he reached the final entry in the journal. March 22nd, 1987. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The boat is sinking. Anna, Emily, and Jack are gone. The ocean took them. But it didn't take me. I can feel it, pulling me down, calling me. The voices are loud now, like they're in my head. The water isn't just water anymore. It's something else. Something that's been here longer than anything. I'm leaving this here. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe they won't. But I'm not sure I'll be around much longer. The ocean is calling me. I have to go to it. Mark's heart thundered in his chest. The words on the page, a stark, terrifying echo of the events that had transpired. Anna, Emily, Jack, they were gone. But the ocean, the thing beneath the water, had taken them. He had never seen this journal before, but here it was. His handwriting, his words, a record of the last moments of the Danner family. Tears stung his eyes, but he couldn't let them fall. He had to keep moving. The truth was here. The ocean had claimed them, but it had left him behind for a reason. A sickening thought crept into his mind. Had he written this in some fevered state? Had he somehow survived the storm only to forget what had happened? The island's silence grew oppressive, but the message in the journal rang clear. Mark wasn't just stranded here by chance. The ocean had spared him for a reason. He needed to find out why. He closed the journal, his hands shaking, and stuffed it into his jacket. As he stood there on the rocky shore, a new resolve gripped him. The light, the figure, the voices in the ocean, they weren't just hallucinations. They were real, and they were guiding him, or testing him. He wasn't just searching for his family, he was searching for answers, and he would find them, no matter what the cost. The journal felt heavy in Mark's jacket pocket, a constant reminder of the horrifying revelation he'd just uncovered. Anna, Emily, and Jack, they were gone. The ocean had taken them. And the most terrifying part? It hadn't taken him. The voice, the figure, the strange calling, all signs pointed to one chilling truth. The island, the sea, had a purpose for him. But what? Mark had spent hours combing the shore, lost in thought, trying to piece together the fragmented memories from the journal with the unsettling presence he'd encountered earlier. The pull of the island's mystery seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to find out what the ocean wanted from him. The shore stretched endlessly in both directions, but the island's interior, where the fog was thicker and the trees seemed to twist unnaturally, beckoned to him. It was the only place he hadn't explored. And there was something in his gut that told him the answers, whatever they might be, lay within the heart of the island. He was about to turn back toward the trees when a sharp crack echoed through the air. His head snapped toward the sound, his body tense. It came from deep within the forest. Another whisper, another sign. Mark couldn't help himself. He set off toward the sound, his footsteps crunching on the dry leaves, his eyes scanning the dense trees. The island had been eerily silent before. No birds, no wildlife, just the distant rush of the ocean and the weight of the fog pressing in from every side. Now, however, there was a new presence, a hum in the air that hadn't been there before. He made his way deeper into the woods, the trees growing thicker as the path narrowed. His breath grew shallow, his pulse quickening with each step. The quiet was unnatural. It wasn't just the absence of sound, but the feeling that the land itself was watching him. The same sense of being not alone that had gripped him ever since he arrived. The further he went, the darker the forest became. The trees twisted in impossible angles, their branches gnarled and reaching as if trying to pull him in. The air grew colder, heavier, and Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the next bend, something that had been there much longer than he had. And then he saw it. A clearing, a ring of strange, white stones, worn smooth by time, stood in the center of the small patch of earth. The stones were arranged in a perfect circle, as though they had been placed there intentionally. In the center of the circle, something shimmered faintly in the dim light. A pool. Mark's feet slowed as he approached, his eyes narrowing in confusion. The pool wasn't just water, it was something else. The surface was reflective, but the reflection didn't match the surroundings. The sky above was stormy, dark, and filled with roiling clouds, yet the pool's surface reflected a calm, bright blue sky, too perfect to be real. He stepped closer, his breath catching as he bent down to get a better look. The surface rippled, distorting the reflection as though the water itself were alive. Something beneath it shifted, dark shapes moving in the depths. Suddenly he was struck by a familiar sight, a flash of blonde hair, a fleeting glimpse of Emily's face, distorted but unmistakable. His heart clenched painfully. He blinked, and the image was gone, replaced by the smooth, undisturbed surface of the water. "Emily," he whispered hoarsely. His throat tightened, and he almost reached his hand into the pool, but something stopped him. A cold voice whispered through the air, not in words, but in the very depths of his mind. "Don't touch it." Mark froze. The voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it came from everywhere at once. It was the same voice he had heard on the shore, the voice that had guided him here, the voice of the island, of the sea. He jerked his head around, trying to locate the source. There was no one, no figure, no presence, but the voice was clear, insistent. "Don't touch it. You don't know what it will do to you." A chill swept over him. He stepped back from the edge of the pool, his instincts screaming at him to leave, to get away from the unnatural stillness of the water, the strange reflection that held his daughter's face. But the pull was irresistible. He knew deep in his bones that the pool was connected to everything. It was the key. It held the answers to what had happened to his family, to why he had been spared, but something in him, something primal, told him to resist. He turned away from the pool, his eyes still lingering on its surface, watching as the calm waters shimmered with eerie stillness. The air around him felt heavier now, thick with the sense that he was being tested, that every move he made was being watched by something older than time itself. As Mark turned to leave the clearing, a movement caught his eye. In the corner of the clearing, partially hidden by the trees, was a figure, a silhouette barely visible in the gloom, standing motionless, watching him. His heart skipped a beat. It was the figure from the shore, the one he had seen earlier. But this time there was something different about it. The shape of it seemed clearer, its presence more solid, more defined. Mark took a tentative step forward, his voice dry. "Who are you?" His voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from the journey and the terror clawing at his throat. The figure didn't move. It remained silent. Mark's fingers tightened around the handle of the journal in his jacket. The words echoed in his mind again. "You are not alone." But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The figure's eyes flickered to life, two dark pools of inky blackness that seemed to draw him in. There was no malice in them, but there was something infinitely sad, something ancient that spoke to the deepest parts of his soul. It was as if this being had been waiting for him, waiting for someone to come. Mark's heart raced. He knew that the answers lay ahead, but the path was uncertain. Whatever this figure was, it was tied to the island, tied to the ocean, and it was waiting for him to make his choice. The figure seemed to consider this, its gaze softening just slightly. "Your family has become part of this place, part of the ocean. The island, the sea, they are not separate. They are a reflection of each other, a mirror. What was lost to the ocean returns to it. Those who touch the water, those who are called, are brought to the depths." Mark's blood ran cold. The words cut through him like a knife. His family's son, Anna, Emily, Kansas Silly Jack, They had not simply disappeared, they had become part of it, part of the ocean, part of the island's unending hunger. The ocean takes what it needs. It takes and it gives. Your family, but they were never truly lost. They are here, Mark, here, beneath the surface. And you? The figure's voice dropped to a whisper, its presence more pressing, more insistent than before. You have been chosen to join them. Mark recoiled. No, I won't. I can't. The figure's expression remained unreadable, but its presence seemed to darken, the shadows deepening in the clearing. The island has waited for you. The ocean has waited. Your family, they wait for you too. Mark's chest tightened, and a feeling of suffocating dread settled over him. His thoughts raced. He couldn't accept this. The island, the ocean, it had taken his family. It wanted to take him. It wanted him to become part of its dark, endless cycle. But there was something more, something buried deep within him. His family's fate wasn't just a part of this cycle. He had a choice. Mark's gaze flicked back to the pool in the clearing, the water still and silent, reflecting an image of a bright sky that felt more like a lie. It's not too late, he thought. I can still leave. I can still escape. You don't have to do this, Mark said, his voice breaking through the fog of fear that threatened to overwhelm him. I don't want to join you. I won't. I won't be a part of whatever this is. The figure's smile twisted, a dark, empty thing. It's not about what you want, Mark. It's about what is, what must be. Mark stood his ground, though his legs trembled with the weight of his decision. The air around him was thick with pressure, the island itself seeming to close in on him. But there was a flicker of something in the back of his mind, something he had never considered. The ocean had taken his family, but he had survived, for a reason. He thought of the journal again, the final entry. The ocean calls me. I have to go to it. His father's words, his voice from the past, and now they made sense. The ocean had kept him alive, because he wasn't meant to die. He was meant to stop it. Mark's jaw clenched with determination. He had a choice to fight, to break the cycle that had held his family captive. I will stop you, Mark said, his voice low but steady. I'll bring them back. I'll break whatever hold you have over them. The figure's eyes widened, as though surprised by his defiance. But there was no fear in Mark's heart. He had already lost everything. Now he was fighting to reclaim it. The figure's silence hung heavy in the air, a quiet anticipation that filled the clearing. Mark stood firm, his body taut with adrenaline. The weight of his father's final entry, the eerie whispers, and the pull of the ocean had converged into a single, undeniable truth. He was the key. He had been spared for a reason. He had the power to end the cycle. But the island was not going to let him leave easily. The figure, though still as silent as the stones beneath its feet, seemed to ripple, its form shifting like a shadow in the wind. Mark could feel it, the deep, unsettling pull of the ocean beneath the island, the call, the invitation. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had no time to waste. You've been waiting for me, Mark said, his voice louder now, stronger. He was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the realization that everything had led to this moment. And now I'm going to stop you. Stop the ocean from taking anyone else. The figure tilted its head, its gaze unwavering. For a moment it seemed almost intrigued. Then, in a voice that was no longer soft and distant, but filled with an ancient power, it spoke. You think you can stop what has been here since time began? You think you can break the ocean's cycle? Mark stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't just think it. I know it. I will do whatever it takes to free my family and everyone else you've taken. The figure's form flickered, and for a brief moment, Mark thought he saw it smile, a smile full of sorrow, full of darkness. You misunderstand. The ocean does not take. It transforms. The ones who come to it are not lost. They are reborn. You've seen it, haven't you, Mark? The pool, The reflection, your family is not gone. They are part of it, part of something greater. Mark's mind reeled. He wanted to shout, to argue, to refute every word, but something deep inside him told him this was the truth. His family had never been lost at sea. They had been transformed, changed into something else. The ocean, the island had taken them and kept them. But not in death, in something else. The transformation. That's what the figure meant. "No," Mark said firmly, shaking his head. "I will not let you use my family. I will not let you turn them into this." His voice was steady now. There was no more hesitation. The figure seemed to consider him, its dark eyes unwavering, and Mark could feel the weight of the island pressing in on him, the thick fog of confusion and sorrow that had clouded his mind for so long finally clearing. "I understand," the figure whispered. "You want to save them, but there is nothing to save. They are free. The ocean is free, and you are the last of your kind, the last who can be freed." Mark's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, it gestured toward the pool, its long, ethereal hand pointing at the water, where the reflections of the sky had started to twist and shift. The face of Emily appeared again, a distorted version of her, the smile frozen, her eyes wide with something Mark couldn't identify. "Look at them, Mark. Look at what the ocean has given them. They are not gone. They are chosen. They belong to this world now." "No!" Mark shouted, stepping forward, his chest tight with the grief and rage he'd been holding in for so long. "I won't accept it. I won't accept you turning my family into something like you." The figure's face softened, but there was no compassion in it, only sorrow, endless sorrow. It reached out toward him, its form flickering like mist in the air. "Then you will never understand," it said quietly. "You will never understand the ocean's gift, but it is not for you to understand. It is for you to choose." Mark's mind raced, his pulse quickening. This was it, the moment where everything would be decided. The figure was offering him a choice, but Mark knew it wasn't a simple one. He wasn't just deciding whether to save his family. He was deciding whether to break the very fabric of the ocean's power, to disrupt something that had existed long before him, long before anyone. But the figure had made one mistake. It had underestimated Mark's resolve. He wasn't just fighting for his family. He was fighting for all the people the ocean had taken, for everyone it had trapped in its endless cycle. And he couldn't let it continue. "I understand more than you think," Mark said, his voice steady now, filled with a new strength. "And I choose to end it." With a burst of movement, Mark turned and ran toward the pool. The figure's cry echoed in the clearing, but Mark didn't stop. He didn't even look back. He knew what he had to do. As he reached the edge of the pool, the water seemed to come alive, rippling violently as if trying to pull him in. But Mark was ready. He had come too far to back down now. He jumped. For a moment, the world around him seemed to stretch, the water swirling beneath him like a whirlpool pulling him down. His body screamed as the coldness of the ocean enveloped him, but he kept his eyes open, his gaze fixed on the swirling depths below. And then something shifted. Something inside the water began to change. The ocean had claimed his family, but it would not claim him. He would not be part of its cycle. A bright light flared, blinding and fierce, and for the first time since he had arrived on the island, Mark felt the pull of the ocean ease. The water that had once felt suffocating and inescapable now felt different, gentler, softer, like a force that was finally being set free. And then he was pulled upward, the light fading, and Mark gasped for air as he broke the surface of the water. The clearing was empty, the figure was gone, the island silent, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Mark felt something he hadn't felt since his family had disappeared: peace. Mark didn't know if his family was truly gone, or if they would ever return to him. But one thing was certain: he had broken the cycle. The ocean, the island, had been stopped, and for now that was enough. He didn't need to understand it all. He just needed to know that he had made a choice, and he had chosen freedom.